Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, yep. So I've started recording. So thanks, Chris Stormer. It's lovely to have you here with me today, and I'm looking forward to hearing some information about reflexology in New Zealand and your past history and the influence that you've had on us here in New Zealand. Speaking as a reflexologist from many years ago when I saw you back in probably about 97, I think. You wouldn't have probably remembered me, but yes. So just if I just go, we'll start at the basics. So whereabouts did you learn reflexology?
Fiona, I learned it in South Africa. I was most unimpressed by it, and I wasn't going to have anything to do with reflexology whatsoever. I had come from a medical background of 10 years in the UK, so I am a nurse, midwife, and health visitor. And so when I stumbled into reflexology, I just thought it was a load of nonsense, basically. How could all these little circles on the feet represent the body, and so on? So I decided, no, not for me. And then the universe, bless it, had its own concepts and ideas. And before I knew it, that was in 1989, I qualified. In 1990, I was invited to China. To this day, I have no idea how they got hold of my name. I hadn't started writing books. And I was then presenting to 3,000 people from 27 different countries. And people said at the time, so why on earth are you going to China? Didn't it come from there? And I said, I don't know, but I'll go for the fun of it anyway. Anyway, the long and the short of it was that they loved what I was sharing, which is what the universal approach to feet. I realized I was actually channeling, which I didn't actually know what channeling was at the time, but anyway, it came out later that I was channeling. And so I started getting further invitations to Los Angeles, Israel, and so on. And at that time, I was funding myself. And I'd just gone through a divorce. I had no home, 2 young children, and technically no money, but I had faith. And whenever I needed the money, the universe provided, made sure I got to where I got to. And basically that was the start. And then from those conferences was how I then got the invitations to do presentations. And my first, I think, was in London, after obviously in South Africa, because I had already set up the Reflexology Academy of Southern Africa in 1990 at the time of my divorce. And also my partner also went off to Durban. I live in Johannesburg. So I was kind of left, and I didn't have too many choices other than reflexology. But I must say I am so thrilled, because being a skeptic led to many, many questions. Now, why am I saying this? Where does this come from? And my greatest teachers were those people who questioned what I was saying. And I think one of the most fantastic times I had was when I was invited to the Skeptic Society. Can you imagine? A Skeptic Society. And I was put together with a top professor from the University of Johannesburg, as well as a top homeopathic guy. And there I was, only having done reflexology for a year or so. And eventually, one day, one of the delegates said, they were all medical students, by the way, and they were all sort of sucking up to the professor. And one of the delegates said, prove it, it works. So I said, well, do you believe in God or a divine source? And he said, yes. And I said, prove it works, prove it's there. Prove, is there any physical evidence? I said, likewise is reflexology. And the most amazing thing was that the professor at the end, he was sitting at the other end of the table from me, got up, walked in front of the table, ignored all his students who were waiting to shake his hand, and came and shook my hands. So that for me was such an affirmation that I was on the right track.
Great. And so how did you get your link with New Zealand? You know, who was your initial link that brought you to New Zealand?
1994, I was invited to Auckland. Where these invitations came from, I actually have no idea. Why they came was obviously they'd heard about what I was sharing. And I remember it was a public holiday, because you have very long holidays in New Zealand, don't you, between sort of Christmas and New Year.
Yes.
And we had quite an interesting group. It was fantastic. And I remember that group particularly well. And there was a lady called Janice Hill. Do you know her?
Yes, yeah, she's a friend and colleague. Yeah, she lives about an hour, 2 hours away from me.
Yes, that's right. Oh, she and her twin were at
Yes,
that very first conference, not conference, workshop. And
yes,
I'm trying to think who was the organizer. And of course, what happened was that once they liked or enjoyed what the universal approach to reflexology was, they then invited me back again. And then I was bringing through the language of the feet. So I have been very blessed. I'm trying to think of all the places I've presented in Auckland, Wellington, oh gosh, Christchurch, right down in the south. I was invited of South Island to present at a conference. It was a place where there was, I'm trying to think, it was the slaughter of Maoris. Do you remember that? It was about 2000, or maybe even later.
right.
And I remember at the conference, it was a fabulous conference, but I couldn't sleep that first night. And I didn't realize that there were so many lost souls that were hanging around. And the next day, I was told what had happened in that area.
Was that
And
Akaroa?
once I made peace with them, sorry?
Akaroa, was it? Was it Akaroa, Christchurch?
It was right down in the south of South Island.
Oh, okay.
But
Yeah.
it was an amazing experience after making peace with the souls and getting their permission to be there. It was the most amazing, one of the most amazing conferences I ever had. And there was this lovely lady who was at that time chairman of your New Zealand Society or Association, I don't know what. And she and her son shaved their heads. I don't know if you were there.
Yeah.
And the son shaved his beards.
Yeah. That's Akaroa. The lady's name was Suzanne Gibbs.
That's it, yes.
Yeah.
So I've been I've been very blessed because when I go over to present in a place, I also wish to get in touch with the energies. So I have traveled around New Zealand. I haven't got right up to the north of North Island, but I've also presented up towards the north of beyond Auckland. Can't think of the name of the place again. I do travel a lot, so I don't always remember the names, but I do remember the places, and I do remember the people, and I also remember the workshops. And to me, that's more important than the actual titles or whatever, because it's an energy that I carry in my heart always.
Right. Yeah. And so the with the one of your tutors, sorry, one of the people that brought you out was one of my tutors, Emma Fromings. Do you remember her?
Sorry, there's a delay. Could you just repeat that?
Yeah. Emma Fromings. Do you remember her? She was
Emma, yes, in Wellington.
Yes,
yes. She arranged quite a few as a yacht club, at a bookstore. She's amazing. Is she still around?
Yes, so she does. She's working for Alzheimer's now.
Oh wow! Because she arranged some of the most incredible workshops, and I remember one in Wellington where it was actually an L-shaped room, and I had to stand in the corner of the L. Were you there? It was phenomenal. I think there were about.
Might have been that one I went to. It was one I went to in Wellington. You had a weekend workshop. Yeah.
That's right, and it was this massive room with about 40-something people, but I had like two separate sections, one down one L and the other down the other L, so to speak. But it was amazing. It was a fantastic time. So I've had some really amazing presentations with Emma.
Yeah, because I remember that was how I got introduced to you, because in New Zealand you were like her, because she really promoted you, and so we were given your books to read and Language of the Feet. We were, we really were blessed with knowing all about that. So that would have been, well, that was when I was learning, and it was a privilege to learn all of that. And also your chart as well, your reflexology chart, that has been a real hit in New Zealand. And I'm really curious about that chart. How did that come about?
Everything I share has been channeled through. But again, because of my medical background, Of course, as I said earlier, I didn't sort of understand these little circles, and they were all different places on the feet.
Yeah.
And at the time I trained, there were 27 different charts, and the heart kind of went on safari. And so I thought to myself, really, you know, if as a medical person, the body kind of stays in one place. And so when I started putting the anatomical features onto the feet, then it started making sense. As a result of being able to visualize the body on the feet, and then understanding the emotional, spiritual side, which came through the language of the feet. That was when I was listening to the Lazarus tapes. I don't know, you may be too young for that.
Right.
Where he was talking about the emotional, spiritual connection with each of the chakras. So what I thought was, okay, you know, if there's the chakras in the body, and we apply those emotional, spiritual aspects to the feet, and that is when the feet started talking to me. So then there were other charts that came obviously after that anatomical chart. And the exciting thing, Fiona, is that I don't know if you remember those hand-drawn charts that I did, but were very, very basic initially. And they become a bit more sort of sophisticated, for lack of a better word.
Sure.
I'm actually putting them in a book now. And
cool.
This time is actually such a blessing, this lockdown, because now I've got time to actually write and put these charts together. So I brought all my charts to the farm. I made a little space for myself to write where nobody can bug me. And it's just so, so special to have this time.
Yeah.
And the idea of this new book is that my hesitation in producing it was the color. You know, to print in color is very, very costly. And so an amazing friend of mine suggested, why don't you just do the book with the chart in black and white, and then put the charts onto a CD disc. And so that's how we're going to promote it and sell it. So it's going to be amazing, and it will have those other charts in as well.
Oh, great. And so I've seen some of these images. You have an Instagram account, I see. I found you, and I've seen some of your charts. Did you design all those yourself? They're obviously channeled, and they're amazing. Some of the detail and the creativity, the thought that goes into those diagrams are just awesome.
I have to admit, actually, that was the artist for the language of the feet.
Right.
And she did it in black and white.
Yes.
So I just gave her the ideas because then I just didn't have the confidence, and also not the time writing as well. And she did a fabulous job. The interesting thing is, like a lot of things that I do is quite visionary, or people I get to do is quite visionary. And a lot of people accuse me of being ahead of my time. I can always remember being at a reflexology meeting, and one of the ladies, very well known, I won't say who it was, who stood up and she said, "The problem with you, Chris Stormer, you're 5 years ahead of all of us." And I thought, is that a criticism or is that a compliment? I'm not sure, but I'll take it as a compliment.
Yeah.
So what actually happened with those diagrams, and they're quite small in the language of the feet, that they didn't really go down that well with some people because they didn't really like the foot being animated so much. But now they're actually enjoying it. And what actually happened is that I call her my web mistress. She's from South Africa, but now lives in Texas. And she's on my case, which is really good. And she says, "Okay, you're going to do Instagram." I go, "What's Instagram?" "I don't know what Instagram." And she says, "No, you just have to do some images and do a little write-up." And so at first I was incredibly nervous. All this technology really blows my mind.
Yes.
So I thought, okay, I'd started coloring in these, and I sent them off to her, and she just fine-tunes them. And we've got quite a few more coming up each month. We're doing about 3 or 4, I think. And I really enjoy it because it's bringing those little pictures alive. And I'm glad you're enjoying them.
Yeah,
because I'm loving doing it.
Yeah, I didn't realize you had an Instagram, so I was quite pleased to see it. So yeah, it's yeah, because I'm a graphic designer myself, so I like, you know, images and color and stuff. So yeah, it's good. But yeah, I have a copy of your book here, to the language of the feet. And I think I honestly believe the diagrams, they're just awesome. You know, I like them because they're fun, and it's a different, it adds a different element to it, I think. And that was something for me, I remember learning at the time, back in, what was it, around just before 2000. It was nice to be introduced to that side of reflexology. right at the start, because I'm a very scientific minded person. So for me, I found it actually really good to sort of understand and see someone's perspective from that. And I understand there's a lot of other people that do language of the feet, but in their own way in different parts of the world. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. What has happened is that I've never franchised or copyrighted anything, the universal approach to feet or the language of the feet. I was told this from the other side, and the reason is that as soon as you franchise or copyright, it stops the flow. Yeah. And so I had set it free, and the only conditions I put on it was, please share it with love and never copyright it or franchise it, because that's the only way people are going to get access to it. I just get a bit irritated when they start claiming it to be their own, because it's not. It comes from the universe. Yeah. All that we share is universal knowledge, and but the moment people start grabbing it and saying, mine, this is my view, this is how I do it, it takes away the essence. It takes away the freedom of people allowing to interpret it their way. Because one of the most important things I find with reflexology and also language of the feet is that people put their own interpretation based on their experiences, their belief system, because that's what's going to work for them. And so this is one of the reasons, and I'm delighted that there are many people worldwide who are sharing this. And that was the aim of the whole idea, because otherwise, if I had copyrighted and franchised right at the beginning, not only would I be sort of doing admin every day, which I really don't wish to do, because I'm more of a creative person, but also it would have limited it, because I could have only got it out to certain areas in a certain space of time. So for me, it's very heartwarming that it's got out there so quickly into so many parts of the world.
Yeah, definitely, because I know in New Zealand it's probably one of the most shared charts, I would suggest. I mean, there's quite a few other ones out there, but I'm curious as to how you, or how the American, Eunice Ingham, did you ever meet Dwight Byers?
Oh yeah. I met him actually in Durban at a congress, and I was fascinated because he got us to all do our footprints with Vaseline. Did you ever do that with him?
No.
When we arrived at the conference? No. So what he did, and it was so interesting because that was his way of finding out the height of the arch. And of course, when we were all sitting there, he was saying, who here is a single person who's supporting parents or children and so on, and a whole lot of people put their hands up, and he showed that everybody there had a high arch. And I always remember that, because I thought, what a clever way of getting that message across there.
Definitely, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've never met Eunice Ingham. I've never met actually anybody other than obviously Inga Dugans, who's South African. But overseas, of course, Sue Ricks, Jane Sheenan was a student of mine. Sheehan, I think she says. I'm trying to think of the other, and of course Karen Middleton in Auckland, yes. North of Auckland, your beautiful Karen. She is amazing, and she's doing the language of the feet and so on. Yes. So yeah. She's originally from Zimbabwe. Right. And I'm just trying to think of, there are many beautiful practitioners and people who share the reflexology and have schools. And I've been blessed to meet many, many of them, and some of them are my organizers. But I haven't met the really big names, and if I know what I mean, older than me. And
yeah, yes, yeah. Yeah, but I was really intrigued when you talked about going to China. That was interesting. When you went over there, did you see their version of reflexology, or did you learn anything from them when you were there, or were you just teaching?
No, I was just sharing, and it was so interesting, of course, because you're head and shoulders above the Chinese. And I decided, because there were so many, and of course they all want their pictures taken with you, and the family want the pictures taken, and they had a massive banquet. You can imagine, there were 3,000 people plus families and so on. Right. So I decided I didn't want to sit at the high table. I had had enough of all this media and people taking photographs. And there was one guy there who was so eager to be seen, and so I swapped places with him. And I ended up sitting in this little table at the corner with my friends. away from the glare of everybody, guess what? They found me.
Of course they
And
did.
that was and of course it was standing up, having my picture taken, and quite honestly, that's all I remember is them wanting their picture with me, and that was a huge honor, and I really enjoyed that. But I was very blessed also because one of the guys from Holland had actually lived in Beijing, and he spoke Chinese, so he took me around to all the places that a lot of people didn't actually see, but it was away from the reflexology. And I was very blessed, obviously, to go to the Great Wall of China and so on and so forth. But to have him with me, it was just incredible. I did go back, though. I was invited back again to present there, but it was a different story. It was that they treated me very differently because it was reflexology only, and they, of course, felt superior. And to me, that everybody's equal. Yes. And but it was an experience, and I love every experience because there's no bad experience. We grow from these experiences. And I nearly didn't get out of China.
Oh, did you?
It was a bit terrifying at the time, but I won't go into those details. Okay, yeah. But it was a very, very interesting experience, and I don't regret it at all.
Wow, yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I just find the experience, the knowledge that you've given in New Zealand has been, you know, quite big, really. And I just know that you're very highly regarded in New Zealand, and I was pleased to have you talking, you know, be able to talk to you today, just to hear a bit more about, you know, your pathway in New Zealand, because with this, I'm trying to create like a timeline of events in New Zealand and just the influence of people and techniques, really. And yeah, that's basically what I'm trying to achieve.
That's amazing, Fiona, and well done. I think it's really incredible. I just feel very, very blessed that I have been entrusted with so much universal information. It's not my information at all, and I always make that very, very clear that it comes from a greater source than me. And I'm also very blessed because now I've written 8 books, and I've got another 4 on the go, maybe 5, I'm not sure. And the 8th book is the Hot Footing It to Health. And that's an interesting one because I was criticized at first for not having any pictures in it. But it's actually taking, you know, the feet and understanding the body through the feet to the next step, literally. And it's very visionary, and it's not the sort of book that people just open and just read from cover to cover. They just find it a little bit too difficult to digest. And the best way of doing it is just to let the book open and tell its story to you. I don't know if you've got a copy. Have you got a copy, Fiona?
No, it's on my list of things to buy.
Oh, yeah. Bless you. I would send it to you, but our South African post is crazy. And I was meant to be going to the UK, which is where I normally send things off, because of course it's more reliable. But now with the what do you call it, lockdown. I'm not going now in April, and I'm going to be going in September instead. So I've had to change, and I had a very beautiful tour lined up for Ireland and the UK. So that's now happening in September. And then I've changed my USA and there's some UK and Canadian ones to next April, a year in April. But Karen has asked me back to New Zealand. So I would love, love, love to come.
Oh, we'll look forward to seeing you then, yeah, because I've seen you a couple of times in New Zealand. So yeah, I saw you first of all in Plimerton Gallery. Yeah, that was a long time ago, and that was organised by Emma Fromings, and then she organised that Language of the Feet workshop that you were talking about in the L-shaped room that was in Wellington. And I think I was still learning at the time. I was still a student, so it was very interesting learning. And then in Akaroa, I saw you at the conference there. That was almost like a lockdown situation because it was so wet. Do you remember that? The weather was really wet and you couldn't go anywhere. So yeah, but that was a big building, and so yeah, it was great to have, you know, you're learning, and I remember having my camera and taking a photo, and you were like, what are you doing? Make sure it's a nice photo. And so I didn't take as good a picture as I would have wanted. You were tutoring at the time, but that's me. I tend to do a lot of photography at the conferences, so I just take photos. So, yeah.
That is fantastic. Another memory I have of New Zealand, which is away from feet, is my other passion, which is swimming with dolphins. And the very first time I actually swam with dolphins was in Kakura, and it was such a special event. And I went with my friend, and when I got out, I was sobbing. And she said, "But you've been waiting for this all your whole life." And I was so happy. And from that time onwards, I became very, very passionate. I've always loved dolphins, even though I've lived in landlocked areas like Nairobi, because I was brought up in Kenya, and now in Johannesburg. But they have always called me, and I've been so blessed to, as I say, to live, swim with them in Kaikoura. And then I used to take groups to Hawaii, and now we take groups to Mozambique, or not right now, but anyway, we will do again. And so that was my introduction to them, and it was such a moving experience. I loved it.
Wow, yeah, it's there are the dolphins are pretty amazing there. Did you do the whale watching too?
I did whale watching in Australia, off Perth, and that was amazing as well. But we also, I went to the Dominican Republic to do whale watching. We went to an atoll which was 6 hours out of the island, and that was a phenomenal experience. It was a week of whales, and they were giving birth, and oh, it was incredible. That's another story.
Yeah. Wow, well, that's awesome. Yeah, no, well, thank you very much for sharing and spending some time. I've loved talking to you, and I think I will just stop this recording now, but thanks, Chris. Lovely to see you.